For more on the legal issues underpinning this controversy, I want to welcome on Jenna Ellis, a constitutional law attorney and a senior legal advisor for the Trump 2020 campaign. Thank you for joining us, Jenna. We've been talking about today, this night, we've been talking about the idea of mail-in voting and the problems that could arise from it. Earlier today, we heard the president talking about how if the ballots don't come in soon enough and if the election results in November are delayed, that perhaps House Speaker Nancy Pelosi could even be president or could pick the president. Do you know anything about that? Could you shed some light on what those comments mean?
Yeah, so President Trump is absolutely correct, and he has been sounding this alarm for months. The problem with universal vote by mail, as distinguished from absentee, is that many Democrats across the country, including the General Assembly in Nevada, as well as the governor now in New Jersey through executive order just last week, are trying to push through this idea of universal vote by mail. That means that the state sends out millions and millions of ballots through the mail that are unrequested and unverified. In New Jersey specifically, this would mean that even dead people would get a ballot. And so the problem is not so much the post office being able to handle the volume of mail. The Postmaster General clearly said today that the post office can do that. The problem is with the counting of the ballot. The problem is the fact that these ballots are being sent out into the ether. We don't know who's going to receive them. And so then if, for instance, like in Nevada, you have an unclear deadline and a cutoff in terms of when a ballot that's received back would be counted, and there's no real verification, then we're going to end up in chaos like we've seen throughout the country in some of the primaries that have tried to institute universal vote by mail. And you have, for example, in Paterson, New Jersey, with 1 out of 5 ballots being discounted. And so that disenfranchises voters across the country. So the issue is not with the post office. The issue is with the Democrats pushing their states sending out millions and millions of ballots.
Yeah, and to that point, the Trump campaign actually has some lawsuits in the states that you were mentioning in Nevada, New Jersey, some Iowa counties. I was wondering if you could explain what the Trump campaign is looking to get out of these lawsuits.
Well, we're looking to protect the integrity of the election process. And so, of course, the Constitution protects the right of every American citizen to vote, have their vote counted, and have it counted once. And so for the Democrats to try to remove election safeguards under the auspices of the coronavirus, that's something that we're fighting against. We want to protect the right of every American to make sure that we can count on our system of free and fair elections. And so, for example, in New Jersey, what happened with the governor just about 76 days before the general election signs by executive order overriding his own state's election law. Not only is that an unconstitutional breach of the separation of powers, that's the province of the legislature, but then just the same as in Nevada, even if that had gone through the New Jersey legislature, that would be unconstitutional because there is an equal protection right for every American to participate, to not have their vote diluted. And you can't change election laws this quickly and think that you can institute this when we've already seen instances of fraud and instances of chaos all across the country, like in the primary. So we're trying to have the court system recognize that this is simply a push for disenfranchisement. It's not a protection for voters. It's the Democrats trying to remove safeguards and diminish election integrity.
To that point, speaking of election fraud, we know now that back in 2016, ex-FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith is pleading guilty to altering emails that were used to get FISA warrants to spy, on the Trump campaign, on Carter Page specifically. And so when that happened, it kind of got brushed under the rug. We didn't hear much about it in the media, and certainly there were no big hearings with congressional lawmakers falling over themselves about it. But you see, with this idea of President Trump trying to steal the mail, like literally going out with, the U.S. Postal Service and stealing mailboxes even. And we saw the Postmaster General be brought in before a Senate panel today to speak about that. Do you think that's more political theater than anything?
Oh, of course. Again, this isn't about the post office. And one thing I'd highlight from the Postmaster General's testimony is that he said that any of these just simple protocols for him doing his job as Postmaster General, he's going to suspend any of the implementations of these protocols until after November, just so there doesn't even have an appearance of interference or effect on the November election. I would ask the Democrats and the Democrat governors, are you willing to do the same? You claim that your executive orders and like the Assembly Bill before going through Nevada, what Newsom tried to do in California, what all these Democrats are doing, are they willing to suspend their efforts just so there's not even an appearance of interference or effect on the November election? We've seen that their resounding answer is no. So we have to ask the question, why aren't they willing to be as cautious and careful to protect the American people's perception and the reality of the integrity of our vote?
Great point. Thank you, Jenna, for joining us tonight.